Susquehanna Township Board of Commissioners. It's our workshop meeting. We note that all commissioners are present, with the exception of Commissioners Barona and Kisser. The board did executive session, discuss matters prohibited under the law, including this case, real estate, personnel. And before we get to the pledge of allegiance on the sign, I'd like to being in an elementary school tonight, day after a tragedy in Texas, all that Texas, ask for a moment of silence for children and teacher, families, devastated by that attack. Like to be led by Commissioner Pyle.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Evening, everybody. With petitions, complaints, and motions from citizens. Someone wish to address the board tonight? May 12, 2022, Commissioners Ray.
So move. Second.
Moved and seconded by Commissioner Denver, seconded by Commissioner Fleming. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Recognitions and presentations. Tonight, Reese teed it up for us, and Commissioner Fleming is going to actually read it. But resolution proposed for adoption approved by the board of commissioners. Just give us a quick summary of it before we turn to Justin.
I can remember it. You're going to read it. You might anyway. Thank you. So the Public Safety Committee, as well as Fortress Fire Company, which is the township recognized firefighter and former assistant chief captain and chief of Fortress Fire Company, Mike Rodkey. Mike Rodkey celebrates 50 years of service to Susquehanna Township in the Harrisburg area, and that is on June 12th. June 13th is Fortress Fire Company's membership meeting, and they're going to have a small closed door event for him as a surprise to him. He's not one for fanfare, and he has some significant medical problems that he's going through. But I think this is an excellent opportunity, and I applaud the president, the commissioners, and Director Martin for helping out with that. Side note for Mike is, besides his service to the township and the area, his daughter, Krista, is a captain with Susquehanna Township EMS and a firefighter over here with Rescue Fire Company. His son Nick is a lieutenant with Brokers Fire Company, as well as a career firefighter in Arundel County Fire Department. And his son Mike is Michael Jr. is a firefighter with Paxton Fire Company and also a PSP dispatcher. So public service is in their blood, and 50 years, he's not jumping off the backside of the fire to fight fires, but there's service beyond the normal firefighter stuff. And this is an excellent opportunity to show gratitude back to his 50 years of service. I thank you.
Thanks, Fire Marshal Reese.
Thank you, Chief. We really appreciate it. We appreciate Chief Rodkey's many years of service. So this is resolution number 2022 R11, a resolution of Susquehanna Township, Dauphin County, Pennsylvania, honoring the 50 years of service of firefighter Michael Rodkey, the Brokers Fire Company in Susquehanna Township. whereas firefighter Michael Rocky has served his community with honor and valor in a 50-year career of dedicated civil service, rising through the ranks to become chief of the company. And whereas his support of the Live-In program, leadership in refurbishing Engine 32-1, the Bushwhacker, and his instrumental role in advancing the company's fundraising and administrative responsibilities have helped make Progress Fire Company one of the premier volunteer firefighter organizations in the Commonwealth. And whereas firefighter Rocky's service to the Progress Fire Company, Susquehanna Township, and Capital Region continues to inspire through his children's service to the area in both fire and emergency medical services. And whereas it is only through the selfless service and dedication of firefighters like Michael Rocky that our volunteer fire companies are able to serve the community and protect the lives of the residents of Susquehanna Township. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Susquehanna Township Board of Commissioners does hereby recognize and commemorate 50 years of outstanding service with honor of firefighter Michael Rocky to the Progress Fire Company and Susquehanna Township. Be it and the same is hereby resolved this 25th day of May 2022 from the Susquehanna Township Board of Commissioners. Thank you, Chief. It's an honor to do this. And I make a motion to adopt the resolution.
Second. Second by Commissioner Bingham. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Well deserved. And thanks for putting us together. Okay. Traffic study. Yes. We have any right now that we can talk about tonight? Traffic study.
Well, we have some that we've worked on.
Okay. Some of the pipeline.
Most of them have been discussed.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have anything they'd like to throw out to the next general? Commissioner.
Chief is aware, this is not so much a traffic study, but I know you've been in communication with the residents on Montrose Street and their concerns about the tractor trailers, but I just want to be on the record that it was brought up and you're working on it. And you've been communicating.
About that today, and HRG advising completing the study for the weight restrictions.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, moving on to item H, the consent agenda. This is only one item on here, which is acceptance of resignation of Pascal Michelle. His letter should be. Move to approve consent agenda. Second. Motion by Commissioner Pine, second by Commissioner Clement. Comments or questions? I would just like to person thank Pat for all his time and efforts. He's a very pleasant guy, always had a smile, contributed a lot to the township in terms of coaching, soccer. Leagues. Just, fell off that. So, I think we'll be missed. Any other comments?
Just really quickly, I always appreciate that. He took me, in addition to what you mentioned, he took me on my first ride along in the snowplow shortly after I was selected. And that was pretty fun and also scary at times. But he was excellent. He was excellent at that role. And it's a great credit. It's all of his volunteer activities. He was a soccer coach when I was coming up, so my contemporary coach like him. It's a great guy. So thank you. Thank you.
All right. Second, and all those in favor? Here's one. It's a long one. Action on ordinance, resolutions, contracts, subdivisions, land plans. Mr. McCall, as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So provided with the agenda this evening and then distributed in a completed format earlier is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a $10 million bank loan for the purposes of providing funds to finance capital projects for the sanitary sewer system owned and operated by the Susquehanna Township Authority. I lead the Budget and Finance Committees, both the authority and the township, met in a joint work session on Friday, May 20th, just to discuss the proposals that were received. The request for proposals was issued by Chris Gibbons of Concord Financial Advisors. And we received 8 responses from 4 banks that were interested. The committees reviewed them and are recommending that the board approve the ordinance as written this evening. If it is approved, the next steps will be for the Susquehanna Township Authority Board to approve to adopt a subsidy agreement, which will essentially guarantee that the proceeds from the sanitary sewer authority will be used to pay down the debt service on this new debt issue, thereby relieving the township of that requirement and also not impacting our debt ceiling under the Local Government Geared Debt Act. I would like to ask Mr. Gibbons to maybe say a couple of words. And also with us this evening is Tim Horseman and Ryan Gonder from McNeese Falls, who are our bond counsel.
Thank you. It's nice to be in front of you again this evening. I know Commissioner Lynch said earlier, you again, that's how I feel too. We've been around a lot. That's good. From the idea of how we want to structure repayment to the idea of making sure there's input from both the authority and the township. So what is before you this evening is the summary of all of that. As Mr. Volko mentioned, we solicited 32 banks. We got 8 proposals back from 4 different banks. And the main difference between the proposals, and then we compared those to the bond issue possibility. And the main difference between the proposals was the S&P Bank was a 10-year fixed rate at 3.2%, but it required that the township draw all the money down at closing. The Citizens and Northern Bank proposal was a fixed rate for 10 years at 3.57%. But it allowed us to draw the monies down over 3 years. Knowing that the timing of this cash is still in flux, there might have been a reason to actually investigate further, taking a higher rate, which is with the Citizens and Northern Bank proposal, but with the flexibility of paying only on the interest that you drew. And we spent a lot of time last Friday at the committee meeting that Mr. Volk had indicated and had mentioned that the longer the delay on the projects, actually the more the benefit of the Citizens Northern proposal is. So the recommendation was to move to the township commissioners themselves, the acceptance of the proposal from Citizens in Northern at 3.57% rate. Variable thereafter, but an interest rate cap is at 3.75%. And it also still needs to be, their proposal was conditioned on final board approval, which they expect to have before the end of next weekend. What I handed out was essentially the summary of what I just discussed. The only thing that's new here is the final page of my handout, actually is a new proposed debt service schedule. It assumes in that debt service schedule all the monies are drawn down as of day 1. I could go through each page if you want, but that's essentially the sum of my presentations. It's what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, yes, months at this point as well. So it's just a summary of the proposals, and it also compares it to the bond issue. It's much less in debt service costs than a bond issue.
This point, yeah, I think at first, we'll begin discussion. We need a motion. So moved by Commissioner Fowler. Second by Commissioner Fowler. There's a lot to chew on here, but does anybody have any questions? We spent about an hour and a half on the phone, Friday after the lovely time, next day. But it was, it really is a lot to chew on. But, you know, my takeaway from that was that it's a good deal, you know, and the flexibility by being able to withdraw it when we want to, as opposed to that closing it, gives us the kind of flexibility, because not all our projects are shovel ready. Certainly not $10 million worth of projects are not shovel ready. Meanwhile, we'd be paying interest at a lower one, but lower interest versus the other proposal from CNN that we wouldn't be paying interest until we actually drew down the funds.
Correct.
So that was kind of the balance that we were at. The bonds were pretty much out of the market, out of the picture. So we're down to those two proposals. Mr. Pine was on the call. I don't know if you'd like to add or discuss.
No, it's just. I appreciate the fact that even though the one rate's higher than the other, allowing us to draw the funds when needed is obviously going to save us a lot of money.
Yes.
By tens of thousands of dollars is what I recall.
Yes, that's true.
Anybody else have questions? Okay, no, all question. All those in favor of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Anything else you need from us?
Dave?
You're coming back in 2 weeks, right?
If you want me to, sure.
All right, well, thanks for all your work on this. Appreciate it.
Yep.
So now we're going before the authority at their meeting, first Tuesday of June. All right. We're moving on to the agenda. Resolution of Susquehanna Township authorizing the installation of an ADA accessible parking space at 230 Shell Street. Chief, do you have anything on this you'd like to tee up?
Standard handicap parking space traffic study with our recommendation for approval.
Okay. It doesn't require an ordinance or no?
It does.
Okay, it says resolution here. Move to approve the resolution and seconded by Commissioner Rothrock. All the information is in your packet. Does anybody have any questions? It's not, it's a resolution.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
I did have one question. So the property does have a driveway, but this is to, and I know exactly the environment he's describing off the field.
Yeah.
But this is to basically, this is to basically ensure that regardless of when the resident is leaving or coming home, there will be a space open, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is a resolution proposal establishing rules and regulations for facility reservations in Susquehanna Township parks. Mr. Kness.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is basically an update to our existing rules for individuals who choose to rent our pavilions or facilities throughout the year. It was cleaning up a few things. We've had some change in procedures. We can now handle these reservations over the phone. They don't have to come in to the township face-to-face to take care of those. Clarify the payment options that they can make, the various ways they can make their payments. And then also updated information in regards to what is permitted or not permitted in terms of bringing in carnival type games like dump tanks and then bounces and so forth. That just puts a level of liability over the township that we don't need to assume. So it just breaks that out and identifies those pieces a little bit clearer.
Move to adopt this resolution.
Commissioner Engel moves to adopt.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Knapp. Any questions or comments from members of the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next up, staying with you, Doug, approval of request playground designs for Stapler and Edgemont Parks. I'll get into this. First of all, did you have an opportunity to talk to Commissioner Hisarell?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And he's fully on board with the playground. We are working on a color change, but he has reviewed the plans in depth with me today, so he wanted me to make sure it was noted for the record that he does approve, and he's happy to see that we're recommending Playworld, which is a PA-based company. Everything is made in the state of Pennsylvania as well. So last year, as part of the local share grant that is available to the township through DCED, we applied for a $150,000 grant. We got $120,000 of that to go towards playgrounds at Stabler Park and Edgemont Park. They're our next two oldest playgrounds next to McNaughton. Again, there's, other than just a lot of wear and tear on the equipment, is causing the reason for the need to update these playgrounds. So we initially were talking to Little Lakes, who were the suppliers for the playground at McNaughton. After dealing with the shipping delays that they had, that I thought were exaggerated quite a bit. It took 8 months for the equipment to get here. That led me to talk to a few other playground providers. Playworld was one, and Recreation Resources was the other. Recreation Resources actually declined. They could not meet our timeline, so I respect that. So they weren't selling us hopes and dreams and then dealing with it later. So it left us with the Littles Tykes and the Playworld options. We reviewed this with the Recreation Advisory Committee at our last meeting. They're in favor of the Playworld structures for both Stabler and Edgemont Park. The total cost with installation is $160,000 for both playgrounds. We'll have the $120,000 grant, so we'll have about a $40,000 expenditure out of the Recreation Developers Fund. The other item that is not listed yet, I'm waiting on a proposal from HRG. We need to make Edgemont Playground ADA accessible. We do have a path that goes to it from the parking lot, but it does not meet ADA code. So with putting in a new playground, we have to meet the ADA code, so we'll be getting that information from HRG shortly on a proposal to design that, and we can get some cost estimates for that as well through that process. And then the other item is we'll have to install the wood carpet once the playgrounds are installed, which is our safety surfacing underneath the playground, same as what we do with McNaughton. And then we'll work with Public Works to remove the existing equipment.
Doug, is that a 25% local requirement, or does it just work out that we're putting 40 or 160?
It just, that's how it worked out. It would have been actually, if we went with Little Tykes, it would have been higher. It would have been about $83,000. So it just, that's how the math works on this one. There's typically no requirement from the local share program for a match.
Okay, so you're looking for a motion to approve the estimates and to go ahead with the projects.
Yeah, what I'm hoping to do is sign the quotes for installation and the equipment. That'll lock the pricing, since we know that pricing changes like on a daily basis, especially dealing with steel and fuel. So this way we'll be locked in price. We can play with the colors a little bit to meet Commissioner Hisro's vision, and then we can move forward. And the goal is to have the playgrounds installed this fall.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Commissioner?
I would like to make a motion to approve the playground designs for Stabler and Edgemont Parks.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Marchek, second by Commissioner Pine. Anybody have anything they'd like to discuss, questions?
I just one, so I hear you talking about Commissioner Hisro approving the designs. Were there issues? Like, is something being changed from what we've been presented here? Or,
No.
I'm just curious.
No, his only concern, and he mentioned this to me during our park tour, that our current structure at Edgemont only is a 5 to 12-year-old structure, and the swing sets are only belt swings, so toddlers, basically that 2 to 5-year-old range, can't really use them. So his comment to me was that we meet that 2 to 5-year-old age group as well, which we did in the design. The actual playground structure for Edgemont will be a 2 to 5-year-old or 2 to 12-year-old structure. And then we added a couple more pieces for the 5 to 12-year-old, some of the auxiliary pieces on there. So that was really what his concern was, that we were kind of meeting the gamut age group of 2 to 12 on the new playground.
Okay, thank you. Is that the same for Stabler then?
Yes,
They made-
same
All right.
for Stabler as well.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions?
I just have one other question. So in the one design, I see a handicap accessible swing
Yes.
and not in the other. Is that going to be true, or?
Well, I can go that route. I would have to reduce to only one toddler swing because I don't have the space to make a third bay.
Okay.
So I could easily add a handicap swing with the toddler swing. I mean, they're really can be used both ways.
Okay. Okay.
But we can make that switch. It'd be minor change to the price for the most part. But if that would be the wish of the board, I can definitely do that.
I mean, I think you should prioritize accessibility, but I'm one of nine. So I think, whatever in the final design, I think whatever the Recreation Advisory Commission believes, I think if people agree, that's the way I'd like to see it done. But I did notice that difference in the two designs.
Yeah, that would be a simple fix. I could definitely have one handicap swing. That wouldn't be an issue.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, Mr. Kness?
That's all I have for you tonight.
All right. Next up is a discussion of the draft Shade Tree Assistance Program. Who wants to kick this off, Dave?
I sure can, Mr. President. Thank you very much. So this was mentioned at the last commissioners meeting earlier this month, and there had been some work that was done on this draft program, but just to kind of refresh the board's memory, there was an appropriation of, actually in the agenda narrative it says $55,000, it should read $50,000 in the 2022 annual operating budget to provide assistance to certain qualified property owners who are being required to remove their street trees if they present a public health and safety hazard. The board asked the Shade Tree Commission to develop essentially a means-tested standard and policy to expend these funds on this program, and that was drafted, I'm not exactly sure when, prior to my tenure beginning with the township. I've reviewed the policy and made some suggested edits. Those were reviewed further by the Tree Commission just last Thursday on May 19th, and they made some additional comments and suggestions that have all been worked into the draft that's presented before you this evening. Really, all I'm asking the board to do this evening is to provide any comments, ask any questions you might have about the program. But just to help kind of give you some context, I also included the redlined version, which included my amendments and those that were offered by the Tree Commission on May 19th. And I can walk you through them, but essentially, I really didn't add much in terms of substance other than a few items. I just did some cleanup on it as a policy that really needs to be able to apply or be applicable year in and year out. And I kind of added in some additional language relative to appeals of denied applications, committing the funds on a first-come, first-served basis, and then also some general indemnification language that would need to be reviewed by the township solicitor prior to its presentation for adoption. So I can answer any questions on either the draft or the redlined amended version. And we can work in any comments the board might have and present back for further consideration. Thank you.
Mr. President, I just had a couple observations. Number one, I appreciate your changes, Mr. Manager. I'm noticing here that in, I think it's miscellaneous provision number 4. No, I'm sorry, number 3. Where you said property owner who believes his or her street tree may be hazardous to public health, safety, welfare may submit an assessment conducted by a qualified arborist. What about if there's a neighbor who has an issue about this, the tree across the street that's in danger to their car or their property, what have you, or their person? Is there a mechanism by which that person can submit? I don't know how that works.
So I would defer some of that answer to the township solicitor.
Yeah, the township has the general power to identify something that's in the public right-of-way that's a danger to begin with. And if you look at the beginning of Section 4, it reminds people that it's the exclusive right of the township to obligate a property owner to remove a tree that has been determined to be a public hazard. So that could be by walking by, driving by, standing under the tree, waiting for it to fall, any number of ways to identify a dangerous tree. And so none of this changes that issue, or the ability of a neighbor to call the township and say, would somebody please come out? And that does happen fairly regularly. Would somebody please come out and see if it's a dangerous situation? So nothing about that changes this.
So I would add, thank you. As far as private trees that are outside of our right-of-way, that are hazard trees or jeopardizing an adjacent property. I've had an experience in communities or I've seen communities that have reference to that in their property maintenance code. That would be more of a property maintenance item as opposed to what this policy is aiming to address, which is solely and exclusively street trees in the public right-of-way.
One other question I did have, just related to less about this document, is more so with the narrative that was included in our item, and that's the $55,000. That's the total appropriation to the Shade Tree Commission. And I'm wondering if there's any opportunity, that we might possibly put more of those dollars. I think we talked about $5,000 for trees and $50,000 for this program. If we might even be able to shift that, perhaps, to allow for more expensive trees. Because I think the $5,000 is the shade trees budget for tree planting. And that, like everything, has gone way up, the price of trees. And I'm wondering if we could possibly, whether it's $10,000 and $45,000 perhaps, $10,000 towards the tree planting effort, and then leaving $45,000 for this program. Could that be an option?
So we're talking about cannibalizing the program before we started.
Mr. President, if I may, I would support that if it's possible, because we wouldn't be able to get so many trees for $5,000 now. And as I'm looking through this, it mentions the program for the tree removal, that the work could potentially be performed by township employees. So perhaps, especially in the first year of the program, and people may not be as aware of it, that the costs may not be that high, and maybe that would be something we could look at doing, is shifting some of the funds, and just for the first year of the program.
Yeah, you know, on the one hand, a tree can go from 1,000 to 5,000 real quick. So you're talking about maybe 10 trees. So it could go real quick, or it could be a slow program to take off because people don't know about it or for whatever reason. So I think absolutely yes. I mean, you're on the budget committee, and I think we could make that case to the board if we need to move funds around. Mr. Provoca is giving you the hairy eyeball.
Well, I don't have really any substantive comment. I mean, we certainly can monitor it. I think this initial year, once this program is in place, is, as I believe President Lynch described it, a pilot program. I think it'll be really telling first year. Of course, it will presumably grow in popularity as more residents become aware of its existence. And I think you're exactly correct too, that the 50,000 allotted for it might go really quickly. I mean, some of the bigger caliber trees can be several $1,000s for removal and to grind the stumps out. So I think we'll have a much better pulse on how to maybe allocate those funds once we have a little time administering this program. But I'm open to whatever the board suggests.
And if I may, one other suggestion. I know there were many years where we didn't really have to dip into the budget allocated by the township for shade tree because we had acquired grants. So if that's a possibility this year, I don't know if that's something we'd be able to do maybe next year. But it's something maybe we could look into again because we were able to acquire grants for tree planting in the past.
Yeah, we've applied for tree tender grant or for the tree vitalize grants in the past. One of the issues is timing. We have to get those grant applications in way before the Shade Tree Commission has been willing to accept applications. The other issue is you have to have exact planting locations. We can't just plant them throughout the township in different areas. So that's been a struggle to try to get funding for that. That's why we were able to get funding for the park, because we had a specific location, and we had applied for one in the first ward that got denied because of the randomness of where they were located.
So if I can, just one follow-up question. So are you suggesting if we move the process up in the future, there's no reason we couldn't accept applications at a different time of year?
You are correct. I had received resistance in that process. Yep. Okay. It was, I think, originally August 1st was the deadline. We moved it to July 1st. But in reality, even for ordering trees, that's a really late time frame because they don't really make their decision until August.
Okay, well, that's really good information. We should probably discuss that at the next Shade Tree Commission meeting then and just explain how that will help the process. All right, thank you.
We also have any questions?
I have. Yeah, on the funding options, the first paragraph talks about Public Works Director determining whether a tree can be removed. And then the second paragraph says the township shall contract with a certified tree removal contractor. So the way I read it, it sounds like the first step is for the Public Works Director to look at it, decide whether our own forces can do the work, and then if not, then we would look to a contractor. So is that the intent of that?
Well, it could be. I mean, I really think that there's an imperative that anybody that's doing work on township street trees be properly trained. And
Can I just jump in on this?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
From the solicitor standpoint, I am a little concerned about, with all good intentions, taking down a tree next to a house or a right-of-way, depending on the size. You have to be trained, have the right equipment, be able to go up in that. So I think that there's a great utility in trying to use township staff where possible. I don't know that it's going to be possible every time with every tree. And for any arborists out there listening, I'd really like you and your insurance to be responsible, not our township liability to be responsible. So I think I think Jody's suggestion is a really good one in terms of trying to use staff, especially to haul stuff away or do whatever. And in some situations that's going to be possible. But I think the majority of times if we're talking about a big tree, we're going to look to use an arborist to do that, or a tree removal service that's trained to do that. And I think we can accomplish both things. So if we can save money, great. If not, from a solicitor standpoint, I sleep better at night knowing that we're not putting a tree into somebody's house or garage or car. So that's just me.
So it's kind of an either-or thing, not a necessarily sequential, we got to do this step, and then if not, we'll go to a contractor. That's fine. In that, the way it's worded, that's sort of how I took it. I was wondering whether we needed to clarify that wording a little bit, but I guess not.
Well, we need to, in the event that we're going to get involved in a low exposure kind of thing that Mr. Miller referred to, well, we need to acquire some training. We need new equipment on the public works side.
No, I don't think so. There might be some need for some PPE and things like that, but nothing really all that significant. If we are doing any removal in-house, it'd be chainsaws, wood chippers. Stump grinder would probably be rented. I mean, those are typically things that you rent for a half day or whatever, unless there's a real need to purchase one. There's an estimate that was in the original draft of this for a stump grinder that the previous public works director prepared that had it at about $70,000, which is probably not that far from true. So it's a big, expensive piece of equipment, which is why they're more commonly rented as needed. But you might be, if you're talking about a large scale removal, a bucket truck, that kind of stuff. But what I had in mind was the small caliber trees that are dead, that aren't thriving, that need to be removed. If that would just be a chainsaw, one or two persons out there, and perhaps a stump grinder if needed.
In my discussion with the manager, he originally suggested no trees taller than me, which would be about Jolly Rancher sized if you're using Hershey Park statistics. And so that means we'd just be removing shrubs. So it's probably a good idea to use a different measuring stick.
Go for the Twizzler.
I know some of our earlier discussions, we talked about the fact that the township is already doing tree work when there's an emergency or a hurricane or what have you, causing trees to come down. So that was the basis, I think, from which the township's evolved. And I think it makes sense, because if there's a tree that's already down, then we don't worry about it.
And Mr. President, I just have one other thing to add. So if you'll remember the initial discussion, this is really a prime example of us just putting forth an investment, a modest investment to save a lot of time and cost later. So, the cost of a tree falling down in the neighborhood, taking down power lines with it, maybe clipping other utilities and things like that. Maybe it gets a gas line. You've got our emergency response personnel coming out, fire, EMS. You've got utilities coming out, so I think this is a really prudent program. And again, I said this when we passed the budget and this was included. I really thank everybody for getting on board with this because it's a prime example of investing a little bit now to save a lot of costs later. So, and I just think it's a really prudent thing to do. So thank you all.
Was there any thought given by the commission and the committee staff to maybe instead of paying for the whole tree removal to have 50% paid by the township and half by the resident? And I ask that because I think we discussed this a year ago when the shade tree appeared before us virtually and we talked about it. Go ahead, Mr. Volga.
My one thought is if you look at the guidelines for qualifying for this, you're 150% below the federal income poverty guideline. So your income's pretty low. So you're basically getting by on what you have. I mean, if you look at that in numbers, so I don't know that the folks would have.
It's not 150 below, it's 150% up.
Yeah, 150.
So it's 50% above poverty.
Federal poverty income levels, it's still, that is.
It is low.
It says below. It's on the, on this document, it says property owners at or below 150% of the federal income poverty guideline.
Right.
Yeah,
At or below, but not 150 cents below poverty level. That's the difference. Now, my thought in raising this is, first of all, it was raised last year. Second, this is a homeowner responsibility, but the township benefits, obviously, for making sure that we have healthy trees and move in time. But still, homeowners need to know that they have skin in the game here, that it's, and as a practical viewpoint, say this program really takes off, if the homeowner pays 50% of the $1,000 job or whatever it is, $2,000, we have more money to help other homeowners as opposed to, just.
I think.
But again, that's why I suggested it be a pilot program to see how it figures it works out.
I think leaving this program as is for the time being, but then that's something we could perhaps ask if we want to do an expansion. Maybe those with the means we can ask to kick in and then put those dollars into the fund to help those without. I think, and that was the means testing was a really key piece, because it's shade trees are all over the township, and someone without the means, as Commissioner Barczyk said, I think that's a lot of burden to place on somebody, even though it is, yes, by the letter of the law, it is the homeowner's responsibility, but I think that means testing is a key piece of just making sure the job gets done, just making sure it gets done, because I think the issue that brought us here is we're relying on homeowners to do this, and for whatever reason, it's not happening. So I think the township intervention is needed. But,
No, understood.
Yeah, and I think
That's why we're all here, that's why we're discussing. I'm just questioning whether or not it makes sense to reimburse, say, up to 50%, stretching our budget, able to get to more trees and help more people who are of the same income levels. So anyway, that's just my question.
There was some discussion on the 19th about maybe perhaps having a second threshold whereby a property owner may qualify instead of a 100% offset of their out-of-pocket expense, perhaps a percentage. We didn't get into, the commission didn't get into specifics. Ultimately, where the group landed anyway was that they were in favor of seeing this program implemented for a year the way it's written, and then kind of reassess and reevaluate, and then perhaps with an amendment considering an expansion of the criteria that may provide for just what you described. And they also had a little bit of discussion on whether we wanted to include an allowance for emergency tree work if there was something that had to be done, because the public health or safety was in immediate jeopardy. But again, they opted to recommend that we implement the policy as written for a year's time, evaluate any pain points or amendments that might be needed to be addressed, and then reassess in the next year.
Okay. And I'm not familiar with UGI assistance program or PPL, but I assume that's a needs-based program, so we can just kind of plug it in. Does Susquehanna have universal free and reduced school lunches? I know Central Dauphin does.
I think everyone does because of COVID, while the public health emergency is in force.
So everyone in the township would be eligible
for free lunch.
No, for this program.
Well,
I think that's just saying
I think
they
that's-
meet the income guidelines.
right.
So
Well, it's
everybody who,
Yes,
program the state says?
It's federal.
That's federal.
Yeah, and it's set by, poverty guidelines, it's school districts. And a lot of school districts are recently going to universal free and reduced lunch. I would just caution against that opening the door to everybody in the whole township, even the millionaires that we have around here. Sorry, Jody, to be a pain in the butt, but it's a question, it's legitimate.
Could word it such that they would have to qualify for the free.
Oh, I could draw a line somewhere, so that's, yeah, take a look at it.
Is it really necessary to have that particular item since we've got so many others?
I think when it was originally created, we used Capital Region Water's program for utility reduction, because they had just started it, and they didn't want to go through like all the paperwork of determining the qualifications. So I believe like when it was originally typed up, that was even pre-COVID where that was an issue. So, but they're just trying to find different programs that already have you qualified for and just using that information as opposed to having to go through your own process.
I mean, I think the point is well taken. I think we can just double check to make sure that the line qualifies the people you're really trying to target, which is, I think, what everyone's goal is to find a precise line. So let me go back and work with staff to see if we can identify this, because I think you're all right. You want to make sure that it impacts the people you're trying to impact, not the people who, have 3 or 4 cars in their garage or something. So.
I'm encouraged by the discussion on this. For this $55,000 budget, I agree, and have that discussion on the $10 million bond. But we're really betting this.
That bond issue wore us out. For a month and a half. No, it's a good program. I'm looking forward to it. All right, how are we going to advertise it, get the word out there? First of all, I assume we have to set it up, get staff and programs in place to run it.
Yes, absolutely. All of that is to be evaluated and determined. I first would, like Solicitor Miller's review and comments, and then we will present it back with any amendments that were discussed here tonight, or he would like to see included from a legal perspective in front of the Board of Commissioners again for approval by resolution, and then we'll get the word out through all the media and social media that's available to us. We'll have the Shade Tree Commission do some outreach as well, and then we'll have to kind of work on the implementation of it and getting a contractor lined up to do the work, and we'll certainly have some work to do after that. Absolutely.
Do we have anybody in the pipeline? Just curious.
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, perhaps others do here.
I mean, we've used goods before.
No,
They did our evaluation.
Applicant, potential applicant.
Oh, applicants. I don't know.
We have at least one tree removal firm in the township. Davis, there's others.
Good discussion. Good stuff.
And it's been ongoing. I mean, I've got 2 previous drafts that were proposed, including one that had a loan program. I'm glad we didn't.
New deal, here we come. Okay. Anybody else on the Shade Tree proposal? All right, moving on. Appointments, Mr. Kabuka.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am very pleased to present a number of applicants to the Board of Commissioners this evening for several different vacancies that we have in our Public Works, Finance, and Police departments. I can defer to the department heads to talk about any candidates in particular, but they're listed in your agenda packet, beginning with the appointment of Tracy Kruger to the Susquehanna Township Police Department.
Mr. President, I move to extend a conditional offer of employment to Tracy Kruger to the Susquehanna Township Police Department.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Engel, seconded by Commissioner Pond. Any discussion, comments? Chief, you need to weigh in here? You good?
I'm good.
All right. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Next is the appointment of Shanna Page. She would be, she's recommended for appointment to the Finance Department to serve as the Customer Service Specialist. She would essentially be an administrative assistant to the department, but also fielding questions from residents, anybody who may contact the township by phone or the walking traffic as well. She was an excellent candidate, and both Director Lovett and I are happy to recommend her for approval this evening.
All right, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the appointment?
Second.
Motion by Pine, second by Napper. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up.
This is an internal promotion, if you will, the appointment of John Haste, who currently serves in the Township's Highway Department, to the Susquehanna Township Authority, where he would be initially a maintenance mechanic 1 under the provisions of their collective bargaining agreement.
Is there a motion?
Move to appoint John Hayes.
Second.
Moved by Pine, seconded by Engel. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next is the appointment, these are 2 new positions that the Board of Commissioners has authorized in the Highway Department to get them some additional resources and assistance. We conducted a series of interviews, and the first recommended for appointment is Cody Zerfoss. His position would be truck driver / laborer under the provisions of their collective bargaining agreement.
Motion. So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And this was for Cody or both? Dave?
Oh, this was, well, I just talked about Cody, but
Okay.
it's basically a ditto for the next one.
Okay. Amend your motion, please.
To extend the offer of employment to Cody Zerfus and Ryan Malone to the Highway Commission.
Is there a second, Commissioner Barczyk?
Second.
All the comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner comments? Anybody? Motion to adjourn. No, we're not there yet.
Oh, man.
Any questions or comments, Mr. Rothrock? All right, it's your time to shine, big guy.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second. Moved and seconded by Commissioner Pine. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.